In a polished boardroom high above the city, an older black woman steps in for a routine meeting, but the CEO scoffs at her, refuses to shake her hand, and mocks her in front of the entire executive team. Minutes later, without raising her voice, she sends a single text. What no one in that room knows is that she controls the fate of their $7 billion future. Before we go back, let us know where you're watching from. And subscribe, because tomorrow I've got something extra special for you. A woman of profound grace and composure, her silver hair impeccably styled, stepped into the polished executive boardroom. A group of mostly middle-aged male executives, predominantly white, awaited their gazes fixed on her with a mix of curiosity and thinly veiled skepticism. However, all eyes swiftly turned to the man at the head of the expansive table, Marcus Thorne Apex Innovations' notoriously influential and self-important CEO. Eleanor had spent well over 2 decades in environments precisely like this, where every subtle glance conveyed a clear message she was an outsider. Yet with the remarkable serenity of someone who had navigated countless underestimations, she approached Thorne, directly radiating absolute self-assurance. "Good afternoon, Mr. Thorne." Eleanor stated, her voice both soft and resonant, emanating an unshakable conviction. She extended her hand in the customary diplomatic gesture. Marcus Thorne looked down at the offered hand with dismissive indifference, a derisive grin playing at the corners of his mouth. Without a moment's hesitation, he folded his arms across his chest, leaned back in his chair, and replied with icy disdain, "I don't engage in handshakes with subordinates." A sudden heavy stillness descended upon the room, as if the very air had grown cold. A few of the executives subtly furrowed their brows, then quickly concealed their reactions, while others openly smirked in approval, their faces etched with scorn. Eleanor did not falter. She smoothly withdrew her hand, her expression entirely unreadable. Her deep, steady gaze never wavered from Marcus's. It was neither angry nor flustered, but composed and perfectly self-possessed, as though this was far from her first encounter with such blatant arrogance. "I am not your subordinate, Mr. Thorne," she responded softly, her tone level, yet imbued with undeniable authority. Thorne chuckled aloud, turning to the board for tacit agreement. "Oh, then what capacity do you claim to hold within our organization?" he sneered. The men around him joined in their laughter laced with ridicule. Still, Eleanor remained undisturbed. She calmly opened the exquisite leather portfolio she always carried, her movements deliberate and unhurried. "I am here to finalize our $7 billion investment in Apex Innovations," Eleanor declared. Each word struck the mocking atmosphere like a stark jolt. An ominous silence enveloped the room. The contemptuous smile vanished from Marcus Thorne's face, replaced by wide-eyed astonishment and unmistakable doubt. The other executives exchanged bewildered glances, appearing to struggle with processing what they had just heard. In Thorne's mind, a frantic thought flashed. $7 billion impossible. How could this woman possess such power? He swiftly dismissed the worry as a misunderstanding or a foolish prank. Attempting to reclaim his characteristic arrogance, he straightened up and sneered to mask his clear embarrassment. "A $7 billion investment? Are you jesting? No one in their right mind would grant that authority to someone like you." Again, the board erupted in uneasy laughter, though this time it sounded forced and hollow. Eleanor said nothing. Her expression now conveyed the cold detachment of a seasoned investor calmly surveying the scene before her. Without another word, she closed her portfolio, leaned back comfortably, and observed Marcus and his colleagues. She understood this moment was more than a mere personal slight. It was the clearest evidence of the deep-seated prejudice and hubris ingrained within the company she was evaluating. Thorne, regaining a fraction of his confidence, continued with mocking bravado. "Well then, let's commence the meeting. I am very eager to see what you have brought for us." Eleanor nodded without responding, her gaze drifting to the large window overlooking the expansive corporate park below. Internally, she made a silent resolution to reconsider the investment, but for now, she would observe a little longer. Marcus Thorne and Apex Innovations had no inkling of the profound consequences of their arrogance. They had no idea that within hours their careers and reputations would be irrevocably challenged by the very woman they had so carelessly dismissed. A quiet but brutal battle lay ahead, and Eleanor Vance would be the one firmly in command. Eleanor's gaze slowly shifted away from the sprawling window where the world outside Zenith corporate towers continued as if nothing had happened. An odd tension now permeated the boardroom even as Marcus Thorne continued his grandiose recital of Apex Innovations' achievements. Eleanor gently straightened her collar, a subtle gesture that barely stirred the air, yet it was the clearest indication that she remained perfectly calm and in control. In truth, Eleanor Vance was no stranger to discrimination or scenes like the one she had just endured. Beneath her unassuming exterior lay the CEO of Vance Strategic Holdings, a prestigious investment firm managing over $90 billion in assets. Her position was the envy of countless finance professionals and the prize every major corporation sought. One nod or shake of her head could move markets and unsettle even the most formidable companies. Yet she had chosen to appear modest at Apex Innovations, not out of fear of judgment, but by deliberate design. She had purposely dressed plainly and shunned any overt display of wealth. No luxury vehicle, no glittering jewelry, because Eleanor believed that in moments seemingly inconsequential, an organization's true character shone brightest. Flashback 1 hour. Eleanor had entered the grand atrium of Apex Innovations headquarters. She had observed everything: the decor, how staff treated clients, and above all, their attitude toward anyone they deemed unimportant. From the moment she approached the reception desk, Sarah's skeptical stare spoke volumes. The young receptionist offered a forced, perfunctory smile, sizing Eleanor up from head to toe, as though trying to decide if this plainly dressed older black woman had wandered in by mistake. "I am here to see Mr. Marcus Thorne." Eleanor had stated calmly, her confident tone commanding any true professional's immediate attention. Sarah, however, barely concealed her doubt. "You're here for the administrative assistant interview, right?" she asked, as if it were inconceivable that someone like Eleanor could have a direct appointment with the powerful CEO. "No," Eleanor replied evenly. "I have a meeting with Mr. Thorne at 10:00 a.m. My name is Eleanor Vance." Reluctantly, Sarah checked her screen. "Right, you can wait in the other area," she said, pointing to a cramped corner far from the plush VIP lounge where two sharply dressed men were sipping artisan coffee. Eleanor did not protest. She nodded and took a seat in the hardback chair in the corner, fully aware that this slight was no accident. It was clear proof of a corporate culture steeped in prejudice, where people judged worth by appearance alone. For the next 45 minutes, she observed everything: Sarah's dismissive manner toward other visitors, the staff's interactions, and the unspoken hierarchy etched into every gesture. Each detail was concrete evidence of the issues lurking beneath Apex Innovations' glossy facade. Famous in financial circles for her uncanny ability to read both people and organizations, Eleanor always sought to understand an institution's inner workings, something no balance sheet or slick pitch deck could truly reveal. Now seated in the chilling boardroom with Marcus Thorne and his team, she knew that her decision to withdraw or proceed with the $7 billion investment was no longer merely about capital. It had become a contest between real value and deep-seated prejudice, between a healthy corporate culture and the toxic arrogance of those who thought power meant belittling others. A faint, knowing smile curved her lips. Long prepared for this moment, Eleanor knew she was not alone, and this time she would control the game entirely. Marcus Thorne and his allies would soon learn that behind her calm, unassuming facade lay a formidable power, and it would cost them dearly to discover it. From that discreet glance, Eleanor had anticipated this meeting wouldn't be easy, but what she was facing far exceeded even her own expectations. After more than 45 minutes of waiting, Marcus Thorne's personal assistant, a blonde woman named Sarah, finally appeared and asked Eleanor to stand. Sarah led her down a long corridor adorned with expensive modern art, stopping at a dark wooden door that looked nothing like the grand entrance to the executive boardroom. Sarah opened the door with polite but unmistakably cold courtesy. "Please come in. Mr. Thorne will be with you shortly." Eleanor stepped inside. The room was cramped and Spartan, hardly what one would expect at a leading tech firm like Apex Innovations. A small dark laminate table stood at its center, surrounded by stiff, uncomfortable chairs. There was no projector or screen, only a few thin packets of papers carelessly scattered as though hastily prepared. Looking around, Eleanor recognized immediately that this arrangement was no accident. It was a silent message about how the leadership viewed her, someone they believed existed, merely to fulfill a diversity checkbox, not to play any substantive role in Apex Innovations' future. Moments later, the door burst open, and Marcus Thorne strode in without ceremony, eyes glued to his phone as he walked, giving Eleanor no acknowledgement. Only after a beat did he look up, his cold gaze sweeping the room before he flopped into a chair with his customary arrogance. "Oh, you must be here." Marcus drawled, his tone dismissive. "Sorry to keep you waiting. We do have a bit of our diversity obligation to handle." 3 other executives in dark suits trailed in behind him, all regarding Eleanor as though she were an uninvited guest. Eleanor assessed each man in turn, memorizing every subtle detail. Marcus introduced her curtly and with thinly veiled sarcasm. "Gentlemen, this is Miss Eleanor Vance here to evaluate our diversity credentials. I'm sure we'll get through this rather quickly." Eleanor offered a slight smile, her composure unwavering. No one in the room realized that every word and gesture was being meticulously logged in her mind as evidence for her forthcoming decision. Once the introduction ended, Marcus launched into an overly brief overview of Apex Innovations products, as if presuming Eleanor lacked the expertise to grasp anything more technical. He even glanced sideways at his colleagues, smirking with contempt. The tension in the room mounted, but Eleanor remained unruffled. When Marcus finally finished his perfunctory presentation, Eleanor spoke up softly, but pointedly, posing incisive, expert questions. "In your most recent quarterly report, I noticed your R&D budget was slashed by more than 20%, yet you proclaimed Apex Innovations was accelerating advanced technology development. Could you clarify that discrepancy?" Marcus paused for a heartbeat, then forced a grin and glanced around as if seeking assistance. No one spoke for him. He shrugged, attempting to sound confident, but clearly flustered. "That's a complex financial matter. Perhaps you're not entirely familiar with how a tech company like Apex Innovations allocates expenses. We frequently reclassify costs across various categories." Eleanor pressed on, calm and unwavering. "And regarding the AI platform you mentioned earlier, what specific model are you employing to optimize inference speed and minimize latency at scale? I don't see any clear reference in your latest technical disclosure." Marcus's face flushed with evident embarrassment. To mask his lack of preparation, he turned to a colleague and feigned laughter as if Eleanor's question were absurd. "Well, on the deep technical side, I'm afraid that's not really on today's agenda. Perhaps our CTO can cover it later if necessary." The others in the room chuckled awkwardly, their eyes still brimming with condescension. Eleanor, however, showed no sign of irritation. She knew exactly how to control the situation through her serene silence. In fact, the contempt and arrogance displayed by Marcus and Apex Innovations' leadership had ceased to be mere slights. They had become irrefutable proof that Apex Innovations was hiding critical shortcomings behind its polished success. Eleanor thought to herself that this was precisely the opportunity she needed to assess the true value of the $7 billion investment she was considering. She closed her portfolio with deliberate calm, sat up straight, and continued to observe Marcus. Despite his dismissive tone and veiled mockery, Eleanor understood that this meeting was only the opening salvo in a much longer battle, one she had planned down to the smallest detail. And for Eleanor Vance, every ounce of disrespect and every dismissive remark from Marcus Thorne and his colleagues would come at a very steep price. The tension in the boardroom persisted, a cold silence enveloping the cramped space. Eleanor sat motionless, her calm, incisive gaze following every subtle movement of Marcus Thorne and the other executives around the table. She understood perfectly what was happening. Marcus had realized that the woman opposite him could not be easily cowed, and that realization made him visibly uncomfortable. Marcus began to lose his patience. His face flushed, a carefully concealed anger flickering behind his forced smile. He leaned back, cast a furtive glance at his colleagues as if seeking an ally, then turned his gaze back to Eleanor. His polite facade evaporated. Suddenly, he broke into a crooked, arrogant grin and strode to the small beverage table in the corner where a few cups of coffee had been set out. Marcus picked up a cup, deliberately fixed Eleanor with a mocking look, and called out with pointed emphasis, "Miss Vance, you must like your coffee really sweet with plenty of cream. Right, I hear that's what our service staff downstairs typically prefer." Each word rang out, drawn out to ensure everyone in the room caught the thinly veiled racist jab. A few directors near Marcus exchanged smirks, their eyes alight with approval at the CEO's crude joke. Eleanor felt each syllable like a sharp blade cutting into her mind. She instantly recognized the intent behind the remark. It wasn't mere teasing, but a deep insult designed to pigeonhole her with heavy stereotypes of race and class. His words reflected not only personal bias, but a deeply rooted toxic culture under his leadership. Yet Eleanor remained unshaken. Refusing to give Marcus the reaction he sought, she inclined her head slightly and replied with measured poise, "Thank you, Mr. Thorne, but I take my coffee black. No sugar, much like I prefer to approach issues clearly and directly." Her deft retort caught Marcus off guard, his face drained of color for a heartbeat before he forced back his self-satisfied grin and leaned over to murmur something to a colleague. Before Eleanor could fully refocus, the door swung open again. A contingent of other senior Apex Innovations executives entered, all clad in expensive suits and exuding overconfidence. The already tight quarters felt even more cramped. Marcus immediately turned his attention to them, greeting each with exaggerated warmth as he shook hands. When one newcomer extended his hand toward Eleanor in courtesy, Marcus interjected in a cold, dismissive tone, repeating the same rebuff as before. "Oh no, Mr. Davis, I don't shake hands with subordinates, and neither should you." His words reverberated through the room, laying bare his contempt for Eleanor. Some of the new arrivals glanced at one another, feigning surprise, before pretending to focus on other matters. Others simply ignored the disrespect, tacitly condoning it. Eleanor remained seated, her gaze unwavering and steely, a testament to her poise and restraint. Internally, she felt a profound disappointment. Not in Marcus's behavior, which she had anticipated, but in Apex Innovations itself, a powerhouse organization allowing someone like Marcus Thorne to wield unchecked authority. This was no longer a personal slight, but a vivid symbol of injustice and prejudice embedded in the company's culture. Amid that oppressive stillness, Eleanor thought of the countless individuals who must have endured Marcus's public humiliations and discrimination, those who had stayed silent for fear of losing advancement or even their jobs. Their silence had emboldened his arrogance and his brazen abuses of power. But today, Marcus had made a grievous error. He failed to recognize that Eleanor Vance was unlike anyone he had ever encountered. She represented not only herself, but the force of a $7 billion investment he desperately needed, yet completely overlooked. Eleanor reminded herself that true power does not stem from oppressing or belittling others. It comes from respect and fairness. Marcus had dug a deep pit for himself with his own bigotry and contempt. Straightening her posture, she fixed Marcus with an icy stare. Her silence spoke volumes. Though he had humiliated her publicly, the real battle was only beginning, and Eleanor Vance would be the one in control. The stifling tension continued to suffuse the cramped boardroom, each passing second stretching into an eternity. Eleanor fixed Marcus with a cold, unwavering stare, not one of anger or bitterness, but of steely resolve, a quietly formidable power emanating from the woman he still dangerously underestimated. The moment Marcus publicly refused her handshake again, sneering, "I don't shake hands with subordinates," Eleanor knew exactly what to do. Her decision was no longer a spur-of-the-moment reaction or personal indignation. It had become a strategic choice grounded in a wealth of irrefutable evidence of the toxic culture deeply embedded at Apex Innovations. With discreet precision, Eleanor slipped her hand into the small leather bag by her side, retrieved her phone, and switched it to silent. One word was all she needed to send: execute. That message to Marcus Blackwood, her longtime CFO and most trusted ally, was enough to trigger the plan Vance Strategic Holdings had meticulously crafted long before today's meeting. Several blocks away, in an upscale office overlooking the Apex Innovations headquarters, Marcus Blackwood sat before a large monitor filled with complex financial charts. When Eleanor's brief message illuminated his phone screen, he allowed himself a faint, knowing smile. This was not delight, but deep understanding. He and Eleanor had worked together long enough that he knew the moment she chose the word execute, it signified no mere suggestion, but an absolute command. Without hesitation, Marcus signaled to his team of financial analysts to spring into action. A flurry of carefully calibrated phone calls ensued, swift, precise, and utterly strategic. Those analysts began feeding subtle but potent signals to leading market watchers whose opinions directly influenced Apex Innovations' share price. Less than 40 minutes after Eleanor's instruction on the world's major stock exchanges, a cascade of mysterious sell orders struck Apex Innovations shares at breakneck speed. Other investors, sensing something amiss, quickly joined the exodus. What began as minor fluctuations rapidly escalated into a full-scale sell-off. Back in the small Apex Innovations boardroom, Eleanor showed not a trace of anxiety. She sat serenely observing Marcus and his fellow directors. Marcus rambled on arrogantly, wholly oblivious to how instantly his company's financial fate had shifted. Suddenly, the insistent, frantic, and relentless ringing of Marcus's desk phone cut through the air. Sarah, his assistant, burst into the room, panic etched on her face. She bent to whisper urgently in his ear. Marcus's expression drained of color. He struggled to compose himself, but failed. He sprang from his chair and bolted from the room without explanation. Chaos erupted among the remaining executives. Some stood bewildered, exchanging confused glances. Eleanor remained unmoved, calmly closing her portfolio and jotting a few concise notes in her notebook, as though she were merely observing an unconnected incident. Down the hall in his private office, Marcus stared at the stock ticker on his screen in disbelief. Apex Innovations shares, his pride and joy, had plummeted catastrophically in under an hour, erasing hundreds of millions in market value almost instantly. "What in the world is happening?" Marcus snarled at the assistants clustered around him. Trembling, Sarah replied softly, "Sir, it appears someone has spread negative rumors and triggered a sell-off. Market analysts are also flagging concerns about our leadership and corporate culture." Marcus recoiled as if awakened from a long-cherished fantasy. His gaze shifted back toward the small boardroom where Eleanor still sat composed, and a sharp unease settled in his chest. Meanwhile, Eleanor allowed herself a discreet smile as her phone chimed again with Marcus Blackwood's brief update. "Phase 1 complete. Stock is down 12% in 40 minutes. This was more than personal retribution. It was the most powerful warning Marcus and his kind could receive. Eleanor understood that in the ruthless realm of finance, sometimes the clearest message must be delivered in the only language people like Marcus truly comprehend: money and markets. He might have dismissed her, mocked her publicly, but he failed to realize that the unassuming woman before him today was the very force controlling his company's financial destiny, wielding the power of a $7 billion investment. Calmly, Eleanor gathered her documents and rose. There was nothing left to say. The decision was made, and Marcus Thorne would learn the hardest lesson of his career. Arrogance and contempt always come with a price far greater than he ever imagined. Marcus stood rooted to the spot in his private office, his eyes glued to the glowing red numbers on his computer screen. The screen's light danced across his ashen face as line after line of data updated, signaling that Apex Innovation stock was plummeting out of control. In that moment, all of Marcus's pride and habitual arrogance seemed to shatter. His phone's ringtone pierced the tense air, urgent, insistent, and cold, jerking Marcus from his trance. He whirled to look at Sarah, his desperation laced with fury. Sarah pressed forward, striving to remain calm, though her voice trembled with worry. "Mr. Thorne, we've just received urgent calls from several major shareholders. The stock has fallen 20% in just over an hour, and it's still free-falling." Marcus snapped around, his tone clipped and tense. "What on earth is going on, Sarah? I need a clear explanation right now." Sarah hesitated for a moment, eyes dropping to the folder in her hands. She drew a deep breath before speaking in a reluctant whisper that nonetheless rang loud in Marcus's mind. "It appears it all traces back to this morning's meeting, sir. Eleanor Vance, the woman you met earlier, is actually the CEO of Vance Strategic Holdings, the investment firm overseeing more than $90 billion in assets. She's the one who directly decided on the $7 billion investment into Apex Innovations." Her voice grew so soft, it barely qualified as a whisper, yet each word hammered home, obliterating Marcus's last illusions of control. He felt his breath catch in his throat, his cheeks burning with shame and fear, gripping the edge of his desk for support. Memories of how he had treated Eleanor flooded his mind, the public derision, the refusal to shake her hand, all now crystallized into ruthless pain. Marcus mumbled, dazed, "Eleanor Vance Strategic. My God, what have I done?" Sarah looked at him with pity and confusion. She had never seen her powerful boss so vulnerable and panicked. At that moment, Marcus's office door flew open, and the senior leadership team hurried in, their faces grim and bewildered. Among them, CFO Robert Sterling wasted no time in demanding an answer. "Thorne, can you explain why our stock is in freefall? Shareholders are calling nonstop. This is a disaster." Marcus said nothing at first. He stood motionless, then slowly turned to face Robert and the others, his eyes blazing with a mix of rage and despair. "You're the ones responsible for this mess. Why didn't any of you warn me about Eleanor Vance's true status? How did you let me meet with someone so powerful without full disclosure?" Robert shot back sharply. "You can't pin that on us, Marcus. You're the one who underestimated people and let arrogance blind you. We warned you repeatedly about your culture of disrespect, but did you ever listen?" Another director, Arthur Finch, jumped into the fray. "We don't have time to assign blame. We need an emergency meeting right now to figure out how to contain this crisis." Marcus silently nodded, forced to admit that the situation had completely slipped beyond his control. A stark terror gripped him. His hard-won career and reputation teetered on the brink of collapse, all because of a few arrogant missteps. Minutes later, Apex Innovation's entire senior leadership had gathered in the main boardroom. Chaos reigned. Voices rose over one another in accusations, but no one offered any viable solution. Marcus sat at the head of the table, despair etched on his face as he struggled to reclaim any shred of composure. Clearing his throat, he finally spoke. "Quiet, please. What we need now is to reach out to Eleanor Vance and Vance Strategic to explain the situation. It may not be too late to salvage this." Robert responded coldly. "You really think Miss Vance will listen after what you did this morning? This isn't just a financial blow. It's the collapse of our company's reputation and credibility. We stand to lose that $7 billion investment and trigger a mass exodus of other investors." Marcus swallowed, hard fury and desperation clashing within him. He could never have imagined himself here, betrayed by his own team, undone by the very arrogance and prejudice he had always dismissed. As the boardroom erupted into heated debate, Marcus gazed out the window, his mind empty. The crisis he faced was more than financial. It was the inevitable consequence of the contempt he had shown others of his disregard for basic decency, and above all, his failure to recognize the unseen power of those he deemed unworthy. Now Marcus Thorne had to confront a bitter truth. He had ignited the worst crisis in the company's history by his own hand. And the most frightening realization was that the woman he had so grossly underestimated, Eleanor Vance, was the one truly controlling his fate, and that of Apex Innovations. Marcus was still reeling in shock and powerlessness when the ping of incoming messages snapped him back to the harsh reality. He stared at his phone screen where a flood of alerts showed Apex Innovations stock continuing its steep decline. Each notification felt like another dagger to his pride, which was already crumbling. At that moment, an audio recording suddenly surfaced on major news outlets and social media. No one else but Eleanor Vance herself had released irrefutable evidence of that morning's meeting. In the recording, Marcus's voice was unmistakable, laden with contempt and severe insults. The racially charged remarks he had used to demean Eleanor now echoed in millions of ears, leaving him no avenue for denial or excuse. Stunned, Marcus stared at his computer screen as the clip spread like wildfire. He realized there was nowhere left to hide. His words and actions, once cloaked by the veneer of his power, were now exposed in the glaring spotlight of public scrutiny. Panicked, he grabbed his phone and tried calling Eleanor. He believed that a sincere apology, however belated, might still salvage something. But she didn't answer. After several attempts, he received a terse, icy reply from her, "Meet me at the office." Marcus bolted from Apex Innovations headquarters, speeding to the sleek office tower of Vance Strategic Holdings. Unlike their first encounter, he entered the building, now burdened by fear and uncertainty. Every glance he met brimmed with scorn and derision. Eleanor was waiting in the spacious glass-walled office which overlooked the bustling street below. When Marcus stepped inside, she sat, composed, arms folded, her cold gaze betraying both disappointment and anger. He approached her, bowed his head, and stammered out a contrived apology. "Ms. Vance, I truly apologize for what happened. My behavior was unacceptable, and I hope you'll give me a chance to make amends." Eleanor said nothing at first, watching him intently. After a heavy silence, she spoke in a steely, authoritative tone. "Mr. Thorne, you needn't waste time on empty apologies. I don't care about your insincere regret. What I want to see is real change. A healthy corporate culture where everyone is treated with respect. That is your true obligation." Marcus's face went pale, and he instinctively took a step back at the force of her conviction. Accustomed to wielding power over others, he now felt vulnerable and helpless in the face of his own mistakes. Eleanor pressed on her voice, growing stern. "I gave you a clear opportunity to demonstrate Apex Innovation's real worth, but you chose disdain and bigotry. Now you must face the consequences of your own making." Marcus swallowed hard, searching for excuses, but fell silent. Deep down, he knew she was right. His arrogance and discriminatory attitude had driven the company into its gravest crisis ever. As he left the Vance strategic office, dozens of reporters surrounded him. Camera flashes stung his eyes as pointed questions rained down. "Mr. Thorne, how do you respond to the newly released evidence of racism? Do you think Apex Innovations can survive this scandal? Will you resign to take responsibility for what happened?" Marcus scrambled through the crowd, seeking an escape that did not exist. News of the scandal spread like wildfire. The stock plunged further, triggering a mass exodus of investors. Back at Apex Innovations headquarters, Marcus was summoned to an emergency meeting with the largest shareholders. The once grand boardroom felt icy and foreboding. Shareholders regarded him with furious disappointment. No words were needed. He understood that their trust in him was utterly shattered. Charles Montgomery, Apex Innovations' venerable board chairman, rose and fixed Marcus with a steely gaze. "Marcus, you have not only gravely damaged the company's reputation, but also jeopardized the futures of thousands of employees. The board demands that you immediately present a concrete, actionable plan to resolve this crisis, or be prepared to accept the consequences of your own making." Marcus bowed his head, unable to respond. For the first time in his life, he felt utterly small and powerless. Outside the window, the corporate park pulsed on. Marcus realized that what he had lost was more than money or reputation. It was the respect of those who once believed in him. He had sown the wind, and now he must face the fiercest storm of his life, a storm born of the arrogance and prejudice he so recklessly dismissed. When Marcus left the boardroom, he felt with utter clarity that the nightmare he had always feared was becoming reality. Just hours after Eleanor Vance had rebuffed his hollow apology, a cascade of revelations about the scandal inside Apex Innovations went public, unleashing a tsunami of outrage that washed away every ounce of the fabricated prestige Marcus had so carefully constructed. At Vance Strategic Holdings offices, Eleanor sat quietly before her computer screen, her expression calm yet resolute. With just a few keystrokes, she triggered the release of a meticulously prepared dossier packed with evidence of racial discrimination, a toxic corporate culture, and abuses of power by Marcus and Apex Innovations senior executives. Those confidential files were sent directly to the U.S. Securities and Exchange Commission, the Federal Labor Authority's key corporate ethics watchdogs, and the firm's largest institutional investors. The moment those documents went live, markets and media alike reeled. Major investors who had once placed unwavering trust in Apex Innovations began to abandon ship. Emergency press conferences multiplied, and top financial analysts issued urgent advisories: steer clear of Apex Innovation stock at all costs. But the crisis didn't end there. Encouraged by Eleanor's boldness, former Apex Innovations employees, once silenced by intimidation, took to social media to share harrowing accounts of the toxic workplace they had endured. They recounted instances of public humiliation at Marcus's hands and experiences of having their ideas dismissed because of race, gender, or background. Each personal testimony struck like a sharpened blade, further shredding Apex Innovations' already fragile reputation. The hashtag #ExposedApex exploded across Twitter, Facebook, and LinkedIn, drawing millions of views and intensifying public scrutiny. Journalists and major media outlets dug into Marcus's past and Apex Innovations' history, unearthing still more scandals long buried. Marcus felt as though the entire world had turned against him. Seated alone in his empty office, every vestige of the power and pride he once commanded had evaporated. His phone buzzed incessantly with incoming calls, but he lacked the courage to answer, aware that on the other end were only stern demands, accusations, and legal threats. Just when Marcus thought things couldn't get any worse, Charles Montgomery, Apex Innovations' venerable board chairman, appeared at his door, his face colder and more severe than ever. Marcus Montgomery said, his voice steely and unyielding, "The board has convened an emergency session and decided to suspend you as CEO, effective immediately. We will launch an independent internal investigation to examine all allegations against you and the other senior executives." It felt like a knockout blow. Marcus tried to protest, but Montgomery cut him off without mercy. "You have no voice here. You must understand that this is the consequence of your own actions. We cannot allow the company to be destroyed by one individual's recklessness and contempt." With that, Montgomery turned and left, leaving Marcus frozen in despair. He realized that everything he had built now faced total collapse, and that he himself would soon have to answer to the authorities for these grave accusations. Meanwhile, Apex Innovations' independent internal inquiry kicked into high gear. Board-appointed investigators interviewed hundreds of employees and scoured thousands of emails, messages, and internal recordings. With each passing day, fresh evidence of the toxic culture Marcus had fostered for years came to light. Offensive discriminatory emails taped meetings in which Marcus blatantly dismissed ideas from women and people of color all were laid bare under the unforgiving glare of public scrutiny. Marcus recognized he had nowhere left to hide. Every one of his actions was now an open book. Eleanor, from her Vance strategic office, monitored every development. She didn't celebrate Marcus's downfall, but she understood it was necessary to pave the way for a fairer, healthier corporate culture. For Eleanor, exposing these documents was not merely about punishing Marcus. More importantly, it was a clear message to the entire business world. No one has the right to demean another's worth or abuse power to oppress and discriminate. Real change sometimes demands facing fierce resistance from entrenched actors like Marcus Thorne. Now Marcus confronted a harsh truth: he no longer controlled the game. All the power he had once wielded had evaporated, replaced by the crushing weight of public shareholder and legal pressure. He was finally paying the price for the arrogance and prejudice he had long dismissed. And the woman he had so publicly insulted, Eleanor Vance, was the one holding the final say over his fate and the future of Apex Innovations. When the door of Eleanor's Vance Strategic Holdings office closed behind Marcus and his attorney, a profound silence settled over the spacious room. Marcus had once entered here brimming with arrogance and confidence, but today he stood as a defeated man, his face gaunt, his eyes weary and desperate. Eleanor sat across from him, her gaze cold and unwavering. Bathed in light from the floor-to-ceiling windows, she was more than just a powerful CEO. She embodied a revolution, an inevitable change Marcus could no longer avoid. "We're here hoping to reach a reasonable solution for both sides." Marcus's lawyer, Thomas Grayson, began carefully, his tone polite and measured. Eleanor merely nodded with quiet courtesy, her composure still radiating authority. Marcus drew in a deep breath, forcing his voice to remain calm. "Eleanor, I know you're upset about what happened, but we can negotiate a better outcome than continuing this tension." Eleanor tilted her head slightly, a faint knowing smirk in her eyes. "Mr. Thorne, this isn't about my personal satisfaction. What matters is whether you and Apex Innovations have the courage for true root and branch change." Marcus frowned, struggling to rein in the unease stirring within him. No one had ever challenged his authority so directly. "What exactly do you mean, Eleanor?" he asked, his voice betraying his tension. Slowly, Eleanor opened a thick dossier on the table with deliberate force, then spoke each word with crystal clarity. "If Apex Innovations still wants that $7 billion investment from Vance Strategic, your company must undertake sweeping reforms far beyond empty promises." Marcus swallowed, eyes narrowing as he stared at the dossier. "Can you be more specific about those reforms?" Without hesitation, Eleanor laid out her demands, her voice resolute and uncompromising. "First, you must fully disclose your internal compensation system. All salary and benefit information for employees must be publicly transparent, eliminating any disparities based on gender, race, or any other arbitrary factor." Marcus opened his mouth to protest, but Eleanor pressed on before he could interrupt. "Second, Apex Innovations must commit to fair and diverse hiring policies, ensuring equal opportunity for everyone, regardless of background, race, or gender. These policies will be strictly overseen by an independent body appointed by us." Marcus's dissatisfaction was now evident. "Ms. Vance, aren't you overstepping into our company's internal affairs?" Eleanor's reply was as steady as a rock. "Mr. Thorne, this is no trivial investment. We must ensure it does not enable the wrongful conduct and toxic culture you have fostered. Third, and most crucially, Apex Innovations must agree to regular independent evaluations conducted by a third party we select. The results of those evaluations will be made public." Marcus sprang from his chair, anger boiling over. "Eleanor, are you really trying to strip me of control over the company I built?" Eleanor met his outburst with icy calm, her words precise as blades. "I am not here to destroy you or Apex Innovations. On the contrary, I'm offering a chance to salvage what remains after the havoc you've wreaked, but I will not tolerate empty promises. These changes must be concrete, irreversible, and without compromise." Marcus fell silent for several heartbeats, his breath catching in his chest. Sensing rising tension, Thomas Grayson leaned forward and gently advised Marcus to stay composed, then turned to Eleanor. "Miss Vance, might we adjust some of these conditions? I believe Apex Innovations may need more time to—" Eleanor cut him off instantly, her voice firm and unwavering. "No, these conditions are non-negotiable. Apex Innovations must accept them in full or forfeit the $7 billion investment forever. I doubt your board and shareholders would willingly walk away from that." Marcus stared at Eleanor, a mix of fury and desperation in his eyes. He understood that these terms not only threatened his personal authority, but imperiled his entire leadership position. Yet he also knew he had no real alternative. The pressure from investors, the market, and public opinion was relentless. He had to decide even in these dire circumstances. After a tense silence, Marcus exhaled in resignation and bowed his head. "All right," he conceded, "Apex Innovations will accept your conditions. We will implement these reforms as Vance Strategic requires." Eleanor nodded, her expression unmoved, as cold and resolute as ever. "I hope you understand one thing. This is only the first step. Whether these reforms succeed depends entirely on your genuine commitment. And remember, if you break your promise or try to deceive us again, the consequences will be far worse than anything you face today." Marcus rose slowly and left the office, his heart heavy and his mind in turmoil. He knew this negotiation marked a pivotal turning point, not only for the company's future, but for his own as well. Eleanor watched him go in silence, fully aware that the real battle was far from over. But today, she had achieved the most critical victory, forcing Marcus Thorne to confront the truth and accept that Apex Innovations' toxic culture could not endure for another day. The moment Marcus stepped out of Eleanor's office, weighed down by confusion and dread, Apex Innovations' board of directors convened an emergency meeting to make a decision that could no longer be postponed. Never had the cavernous boardroom felt so heavy. The directors' eyes were tense, unsettled, but determined. Under intense pressure from public opinion, the market, and major shareholders, they knew they had no choice but to embrace the sweeping changes Eleanor had demanded. Chairman Charles Montgomery rose, his face grave, and announced the inevitable. "We cannot deny that the company is in its gravest crisis to date. The board has unanimously decided that Marcus Thorne will be removed from his position as CEO, effective immediately." A charged silence fell over the room. Though members had anticipated this, Charles's formal declaration still drove home the weight of what was about to happen. Marcus sat quietly, his face ashen, struggling to hide his deep disappointment and anger. At the same time, Charles continued, turning to the company's chief financial officer. "We are appointing Valerie Hayes, our CFO, as acting CEO to guide Apex Innovations through this crisis." Valerie Hayes, a composed middle-aged woman with neatly pinned light brown hair, stood calmly. Known for her intelligence, decisiveness, and fairness, she understood that this was her opportunity to root out the toxic culture that had driven Apex Innovations to the brink. From her first day in her new role, Valerie summoned all senior leadership to an urgent meeting. Some of the more conservative directors exchanged uneasy looks, but Valerie spoke with clarity and resolve. "We must implement the extensive reforms required by Vance Strategic Holdings. I will accept no reasons for delay or dissent. Anyone who feels unable to meet our new standards of transparency and diversity may depart now." Murmurs of discontent rose through the room. Michael Davis, a long-standing director under Marcus, stood to object sharply. "Miss Hayes, do you realize you're undermining the leadership foundation of this company? Reforms are necessary, but are these drastic measures the right solution?" Valerie met his challenge without hesitation, her gaze unwavering. "Precisely that so-called leadership foundation is what has driven us over the edge. Unless we discard those flawed values, this company cannot survive." Valerie then launched a series of decisive reforms. She ordered full disclosure of every employee's compensation, dismantling the inequalities that had festered for years. Simultaneously, she terminated several entrenched conservative directors known for their discriminatory attitudes, individuals who had held influential positions for far too long. Each dismissal sparked intense debate both inside and outside the company. Some argued Valerie was moving too hastily, adding chaos to an already turbulent period. But she remained unshaken, knowing these bold steps were essential to restore trust among employees and investors. Over the following days, Valerie personally oversaw the creation of an independent diversity and equity oversight committee, rolling out objective, transparent hiring standards. A third-party organization nominated by Vance Strategic Holdings was swiftly established to conduct rigorous periodic assessments of Apex Innovation's work environment and corporate culture. At first, many employees and mid-level managers doubted the effectiveness of these changes. Yet within weeks, they began to see Valerie's genuine commitment. Gradually, faith was rebuilt and hope kindled among those who had long endured bias and pressure in the financial markets. Apex Innovation stock initially swung wildly in response to Valerie's sweeping actions, but investors soon recognized the company's genuine pivot toward positive change. Financial analysts shifted from issuing sell-off warnings to advising a close watch on Apex Innovation's restructuring progress. From her Vance Strategic Holdings office, Eleanor Vance monitored every development with cautious satisfaction. She understood the challenges Valerie faced, and it reinforced her confidence that the $7 billion investment she was considering could indeed catalyze a profound turnaround. Meanwhile, Marcus sat in his luxurious yet lonely apartment, following the news of Apex Innovation's transformation. He bitterly realized the company was beginning to revive without him under Valerie's decisive leadership. Each new policy and reform served as a painful reminder his downfall was not the result of a single careless decision, but the inevitable outcome of a toxic culture he had built and maintained for years. Valerie Hayes knew the road ahead still held many challenges, but she believed deeply in the power of transparency and equity. She was determined to spark a true cultural revolution, one that would leave an indelible mark on Apex Innovation's history. The moment the door of Eleanor's Vance Strategic Holdings office closed behind Marcus and his attorney, a profound silence fell over the expansive room. Marcus had once entered here brimming with arrogance and confidence, but today he looked like a defeated man, haggard, exhausted, and desperate. Eleanor sat across from him, her gaze cold and unwavering. In the bright light streaming through the floor-to-ceiling windows, she was more than a powerful CEO. She embodied a revolution, a change Marcus could no longer evade. "We're here hoping to reach a reasonable solution for both parties." Marcus's lawyer, Thomas Grayson, began, his voice careful and polite. Eleanor simply nodded, maintaining her calm, authoritative demeanor. Marcus drew a deep breath and forced his voice to remain steady. "Eleanor, I know you're unhappy with what happened, but surely we can work out something better than this standoff." Eleanor tilted her head slightly, a hint of wry amusement in her eyes. "Mr. Thorne, this isn't about my personal satisfaction. What concerns me is whether you and Apex Innovations have the courage for fundamental root and branch change." Marcus frowned, struggling to hide the discomfort rising within him. No one had ever challenged his authority so directly. "What exactly do you mean, Eleanor?" he asked, tension edging his voice. Slowly, Eleanor opened a thick dossier on the table with deliberate force and spoke each word with steely clarity. "If Apex Innovation still wants that $7 billion investment from Vance Strategic, your company must undertake sweeping reforms far beyond empty promises." Marcus swallowed and looked down at the dossier, skeptical. "Can you specify what reforms you have in mind?" Without hesitation, Eleanor laid out her demands in firm, uncompromising tones. "First, you must fully disclose your entire compensation system. All salary and benefit information for every employee must be publicly transparent to eliminate any disparities based on gender, race, or any other arbitrary factor." Marcus began to protest, but Eleanor cut him off immediately. "Second, Apex Innovations must commit to fair and diverse hiring policies, ensuring equal opportunity for all, regardless of background, race, or gender. These policies will be rigorously overseen by an independent body appointed by us." Marcus's impatience became evident. "Miss Vance, aren't you overstepping into our company's internal affairs?" Eleanor replied evenly, without a flicker of doubt. "Mr. Thorne, this $7 billion investment is no game. We need to ensure it doesn't prop up the misconduct and toxic culture you fostered. Third, and most critically, Apex Innovations must agree to regular independent audits by a third party we select. The results of those audits will be published publicly. Marcus leapt to his feet, fury in his voice. Eleanor, are you really trying to strip me of control over the company I built? Eleanor remained seated, her tone razor sharp. I have no desire to destroy you or Apex Innovations. I'm trying to help you salvage what's left after the havoc you've caused, but I will not accept empty pledges. These reforms must be concrete, specific, and irreversible. Marcus fell silent for a few heartbeats, a catch in his throat. Sensing the tension, Thomas Grayson quietly urged him to stay calm, then addressed Eleanor. Miss Vance, might we adjust some of these conditions? Apex Innovations may need more time to… Eleanor cut him off instantly, her voice unwavering. No, these conditions are non-negotiable. Apex Innovations must accept them in full or lose the $7 billion investment forever. I doubt your board and shareholders would willingly walk away from that. Marcus stared at her, a mixture of anger and desperation in his eyes. He knew these demands threatened not only his personal authority, but also his future leadership. Yet he also realized he had no other option. Pressure from investors, the market, and public opinion left him no choice but to decide, even under the worst circumstances. After a tense pause, Marcus exhaled in resignation and bowed his head. All right, he said, Apex Innovations will accept your conditions. We will implement these reforms as Vance Strategic requires. Eleanor nodded, her expression unchanged, still cold and resolute. I hope you understand this is only the first step. Whether these reforms succeed depends on your genuine commitment. And remember, if you break your promise or try to deceive us again, the consequences will be far more severe than anything you face today. Marcus rose slowly and left the office, his heart heavy and his mind in turmoil. He understood that this negotiation marked a pivotal turning point, not only for the company's future, but for his own. Eleanor watched him depart in silence, fully aware that the real battle was far from over. But today, she had achieved the most critical victory, forcing Marcus Thorne to confront the truth and accept that the toxic culture he had created could not survive another day. In the wake of that landmark agreement, the atmosphere at Apex Innovations underwent a complete transformation. The months of tension, conflict, and uncertainty gave way to a new spirit of hope, confidence, and positive energy under Valerie Hayes' decisive leadership. Valerie recognized that her mission extended far beyond mere crisis management. She was tasked with rebuilding the company's culture from the ground up, ensuring that the grievous mistakes of the past could never be repeated. With unwavering determination, she championed sweeping reforms from a fair, transparent hiring system to robust diversity and inclusion policies. Where Apex Innovations' culture had once been known for its authoritarianism and bias, it became open and transparent. Every week, Valerie held town hall meetings to solicit employee feedback, cultivating a workplace where everyone felt heard and respected. Those who had once remained silent out of fear now felt empowered to share ideas and innovations without dread of punishment or contempt. Valerie also partnered closely with independent organizations to conduct regular cultural audits. The reports from these audits were published publicly, earning renewed trust from investors in the market. Under this rigorous oversight, Apex Innovations' reputation gradually recovered, and it emerged as a new emblem of positive change in an industry long criticized for conservatism and unfair practices. Against this backdrop of revitalization, Eleanor Vance, who had been closely monitoring every development, arranged a formal meeting with Valerie to discuss the future of Vance Strategic Holdings' contemplated $7 billion investment. They met at Apex Innovations headquarters in a bright, welcoming conference room that reflected the company's renewed ethos. When Eleanor entered, she immediately sensed the difference. The coldness and prejudice she'd once encountered were gone, replaced by friendly smiles and warm greetings, tangible proof of Valerie's hard work. Valerie rose to welcome her, offering a genuine warm smile. Welcome back, Miss Vance. I hope you can see the remarkable changes we've made at Apex Innovations. Eleanor returned the smile, her eyes reflecting genuine satisfaction. I've been watching your reforms closely, Valerie. Honestly, you've exceeded my highest expectations. Their conversation was candid and open. Valerie detailed the reform success's impressive statistics on the increased representation of women and people of color in senior roles, full transparency in compensation, and programs that made employees feel valued and heard. After listening attentively, Eleanor nodded and delivered the announcement everyone had been awaiting. "Valerie, I am pleased to confirm that Vance Strategic Holdings will proceed with the full $7 billion investment in Apex Innovations. I believe this is not only a sound business decision, but also a strong vote of confidence in the new corporate culture you and your team are building." News of the $7 billion investment spread quickly, sparking an immediate positive reaction in the market. Apex Innovations stock climbed steadily as investor confidence was restored. Financial analysts began to cite Apex Innovations as a model for corporate governance, transparency, and inclusive culture. Under Valerie's leadership, Apex Innovations didn't just recover, it became an industry pioneer. Other major tech firms followed suit, restructuring their own internal systems, removing entrenched negativism, adopting fair hiring practices, and commissioning independent cultural audits. Once mired in scandal and crisis, Apex Innovations experienced a remarkable rebirth thanks to Valerie's bold vision and Eleanor Vance's strategic backing. Former skeptics within the company now took pride in being part of this powerful transformation. And Marcus Thorne, the man who once wielded supreme authority at Apex Innovations, could only observe these triumphs from afar, consumed by deep regret. He realized that the power he had coveted was ultimately illusory. True power lay in the respect, fairness, and transparency that Valerie and Eleanor had tirelessly championed. Apex Innovations' revival marked more than a business success. It was a historic turning point in how companies perceived the essential role of diversity and equity. Through her decisive investment, Eleanor Vance sent a resounding message. Equality, respect, and inclusion are not mere ideals, but vital prerequisites for any organization's enduring success in today's world. The spectacular success of Apex Innovations' deep-seated reforms quickly rippled through the tech industry and financial world, proving the real power of a transparent, diverse corporate culture. Eleanor Vance recognized that Apex Innovations' dramatic turnaround wasn't just a one-company story. It was a rare opportunity to spark positive, lasting change across the entire investment landscape. Determined to seize this moment, Eleanor took center stage at a major New York event attended by the world's top financial leaders. Confident and compelling, she unveiled Vance Strategic Holdings' new investment criteria. From now on, any company seeking their funding must meet rigorous standards of equality, diversity, and transparency in governance and culture. The room fell silent as Eleanor declared, "Going forward, Vance Strategic will evaluate companies not only on profits and growth potential, but also on leadership ethics, corporate culture, and genuine commitment to diversity and inclusion. This isn't just the right thing to do, it's the only way to secure sustainable value for investors and society alike." Her bold statement shook the global finance community. Companies that wanted Vance Strategic's backing scrambled to overhaul their governance, revamp hiring policies, and reshape corporate culture. Within weeks, dozens of major firms voluntarily adopted the standards Eleanor had announced, setting off an unprecedented wave of reform. Across financial forums and social media, debates raged over corporate responsibility and the role of major investors. Seeing the mounting pressure, other leading investment houses began instituting similar criteria, retooling their partner selection and portfolio management to align with these new norms. But Eleanor knew that changing corporate behavior required more than just standards and speeches. She aimed to drive real internal change by empowering a new generation of leaders from historically overlooked communities. With that goal, Vance Strategic launched a special investment and training program for emerging leaders from underrepresented groups, people of color, women, and immigrants. The initiative provided not only capital, but also intensive leadership and governance training, equipping them with the confidence and skills to transform their own companies and communities. These rising leaders soon made their mark, delivering strong business results while exemplifying diversity and fairness in the boardroom. Eleanor stood beside them as a hands-on mentor, offering practical advice and a sympathetic ear whenever they faced challenges. In a Forbes interview, Eleanor stated firmly, "True investment power isn't about short-term gains. It's about shaping society and opening real opportunities for everyone. Responsible investing isn't a passing trend. It's a long-term commitment that every major investor must embrace." From afar, Marcus Thorne, the once all-powerful CEO who lost everything to his arrogance and prejudice, watched Eleanor's rise with growing awe. He realized she had achieved what he never dared to imagine, transforming the business world through economic influence and genuine social responsibility. Meanwhile, under Eleanor's ongoing support, Valerie Hayes and Apex Innovations flourished. The company became a new standard for success, rooted in ethical values and social responsibility. Apex Innovations' full recovery and its inspiring example encouraged other firms to believe that financial performance and social good could truly go hand in hand. Years later, standing on a stage to accept a prestigious award for excellence in socially responsible investing, Eleanor addressed thousands with passion and pride. "We each choose the legacy we leave behind. I choose one of equality, diversity, and transparency. I choose to invest in people, in the young leaders changing society every day by giving them real power, voice, and opportunity." The audience erupted in applause, but Eleanor knew her journey wasn't over. She vowed to continue standing with the next generation of leaders, supporting them with all her financial resources and experience, because only when economic power is used wisely can the world truly change. Eleanor Vance's story and the revolution at Apex Innovations became a classic lesson for investors and businesses everywhere. It demonstrated not just the transformative power of one individual, but also that integrity, transparency, and diversity aren't mere ideals. They are the strongest foundation for lasting success. And that is the legacy Eleanor Vance is proud to leave, a legacy far beyond the numbers. A clear message: the true power is not in oppressing others, but in creating positive, enduring change for all. What about you? Do you believe every company should adopt equal opportunity and transparency standards like Vance Strategic? Share your thoughts in the comments below. If this story moved and inspired you, please share the video, and subscribe to help us spread these positive values and make the world a better place. Thank you for joining us, and see you in our next inspiring story. Eleanor's story is not just about corporate power or financial influence. It's about something far deeper. It's about dignity, about knowing your worth in a world that too often forgets to look beyond appearances. It reminds us that quiet strength can be more powerful than loud authority, and that true leadership begins with integrity, fairness, and respect for all. What about you? Have you ever felt overlooked, underestimated, or dismissed simply because of who you are or how you look? What did you do in that moment? Or what would you wish to say to someone going through it now? If this story spoke to something inside you, even just a little, we invite you to leave a comment below. Your words may be the encouragement someone else needs to read today. And if you believe stories like Eleanor's can inspire change, please gently tap the like button, share this video with someone who might need it, and subscribe so we can keep bringing more meaningful stories to light. Thank you for being here. Thank you for listening. And most of all, thank you for believing in a better, kinder world.
Join us to share meaningful stories by hitting the like and subscribe buttons. Don't forget to turn on the notification bell to start your day with profound lessons and heartfelt empathy.